Can we get 25? That's fine. Do we need the microphone for this? Yeah. So you can have a seat. That's fine. Microphone. Oh. Maybe if you could just talk real loud for me. Oh, hold on just a minute. I really can't hear you.
I have a hernia problem. That's why I start pain.
Okay. Oh, you have a problem with a hernia.
Yes.
Okay, and it's really bothering you to the point
Yeah.
where you can't concentrate.
Yeah, today is, I don't know why it bother me too much.
I know, but what I want to make sure you understand, if I excuse you today, I'm excusing you from the jury.
I'm trying to go today home and take medicine and rest, get ready for tomorrow.
I can't do that. I can't have that done. We have to keep going.
Okay.
So, I mean, has it been bothering you other days while you've been on the jury?
No, today start now. Never bother me more than 1-2 weeks I'm here.
Okay, but it might bother you also tomorrow?
I'm not sure, but I'm trying to do my best to.
I know you're trying to do your best, but I want to make sure you're healthy too. I don't want you to ruin your health for this. All right, just sit there for a second. If I can have the attorneys. Or do you have any? All right, so we just want to make sure you're healthy and everything, so we're going to excuse you from this jury, okay? All right, just take care of yourself, okay? All right, thank you. All right, you can go back. Thank you. All right. Yes, ma'am. Do you have something before the jury comes in? Okay, which one? 548. Perfect, okay. All right. Okay, 548 is done. All right. I did have one question. There seems to be a few, that's okay, you can stay there. We don't have the jury here. There seems to be a few exhibits I just want to make sure of. We have everything that you just gave us earlier from Dr. Kipper's deposition, but I just want to make sure if there were redactions needed for 395 or 414, or am I using mine for that? I just want to see. I mean, I can just give you the numbers of ones I'm not sure about, and you can look at it and we can move on. I just, 405, 455, 304, 307, 395, and 414. I'm just not sure if those, I'm waiting for redactions or if I'm using the ones I'm going to use. And then you had one that, I'm not sure if you said 1083 or 283. So if you could let me know. I heard 1083 as the exhibit number. Jamie heard 283. So I just want to make sure we get the right one. That was with Dr. Kippers. You said 1063, then you said either 1083 or 283, and I'm not sure which. You can get back to me on it, Mr. Nadelhoff. I don't want to catch you off guard.
I do have the redacted versions of 304, 455, 405.
Oh, well, there you go.
I think it's probably 283. I have 283.
283?
Yeah.
Jamie's always right. That's good. Good to know. Okay. All right. If you want to hand those up, that'd be fantastic. All right. Is there anything else before the jury comes? Yes,
Your Honor, just for the record, Plaintiff's Exhibit 47, Plaintiff's Exhibit 48, and Plaintiff's Exhibit 41 were also used and offered during Kipper, but Dr. Kipper's deposition, I believe I passed the redacted versions of those up to you.
Yes, we have all of those.
Okay.
Thank you. I think that should be everything. If not, we'll get back with you. Okay, thank you. Know where to find you. All right. Okay, are we ready for the jury then? All right, thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Just to let you know, Juror 25 was experiencing some health issues, and obviously your health is a top priority for us. So I went ahead and excused him for the jury, and that's why we have alternates. So, okay? All right, thank you. All right, we can continue with Ms. Lloyd's testimony.
Where it says this protracted therapy will include 12-step private counseling and personal psychotherapy and couples therapy with his fiancee Amber. Both are in agreement to this plan. Do you see where I'm referring?
Yes.
Do you recall that couples therapy was a component of Mr. Depp's treatment?
I don't recall what was set between him and the doctor.
Do you recall Mr. Depp and Ms. Hurd attending couples therapy together?
Yes.
If we could turn to the next page here. And then at the top, it says, I met with Amber for 90 minutes and discussed the above and her concerns that he be strictly monitored and supervised. Do you recall Dr. Kipper meeting with Amber early on in Mr. Depp's treatment?
I do not.
If we could bring back up document B, which is now marked as Exhibit 22, is that correct?
23.
23? Oh. Can we please go to the entry for June 24th, 2014, which is on Dep 1661.
Okay.
Okay. with respect to the entry for June 24th, 2014, this is a note, this is an entry you prepared, correct?
Correct.
And the first line says, RN and MD met with patient's fiance to inform her of treatment plan for patient. Do you see that?
I do.
Does this refresh your recollection that you attended a meeting with Dr. Kipper and Ms. Hurd concerning Mr. Depp's treatment?
I don't recall the meeting.
Do you have any reason to doubt that this meeting occurred?
No.
Do you have any, other than what's reflected in this note, do you have any other independent recollection of any such meeting with Dr. Kipper and Ms. Hurd?
I do not.
If I could direct your attention just to the last line of the note, it says here, she was encouraged to call RN or MD with any questions or concerns that might arise. Do you see that?
I do.
Throughout your treatment of Mr. Depp, did Ms. Hurd reach out to you with questions and concerns?
Yes.
She had your phone number, correct?
Yes.
And I think we saw some text messages that Mr. Nadelhoff was asking you questions where Ms. Hurd was reaching out to you, correct?
Correct.
When Mr. Depp became your patient, did Ms. Hurd ever show you any pictures of Mr. Depp?
I don't recall.
Do you recall Ms. Hurd showing you any pictures of cocaine?
I don't recall.
Do you recall Ms. Hurd ever showing you any audio recordings of Mr. Depp?
I don't recall.
Okay, I'd like to move on to the Mr. Depp's detox, and that was on his private island, correct?
Correct.
And you traveled down to the island with Mr. Depp, is that right?
I don't recall. I'd have to, it should be in my notes.
We can look at those in a moment. But you were on the island with Mr. Depp for the majority of his detox, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And when you were on the island, did you see where Mr. Depp was staying?
Yes.
And was Ms. Hurd staying with him in that location as well?
Yes.
And what did their accommodations look like?
Can you be more specific?
What type of structure were they staying in?
It was a house.
Could we pull up document E, which is a short video?
Please stand by.
And for the record, this was produced as Depp 9811.
Bearing Exhibit 25. Let me know whenever you need me to play, Counsel.
Please play, thank you. Ms. Lloyd, do you recognize the location reflected in that video?
Yes.
And what is it?
It's the Johnny's home on his island.
And is that where he was staying during the detox process?
Yes.
Is that video consistent with how the house looked in August of 2014?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any part of the house that's not reflected in that video?
The bathroom wasn't in the video.
When you were on the island, you were personally overseeing Mr. Depp's detox process, correct?
Correct.
And how often would you see him in person during that?
That's an answer.
It varied.
Did you see him in person at least once a day?
I cannot recall.
When Dr. Kipper arrived, do you recall how often he would see Mr. Depp?
I do not.
What substances was Mr. What substances was Mr. Depp detoxing from?
Opiates.
Was he detoxing from any other substances?
Not on the, no, I don't recall.
Have you overseen other patients detoxing from opiates before you were caring for Mr. Depp?
Yes.
How many would you estimate?
Hundreds.
What is that process? And what does that process do to the person physically?
They go through withdrawal symptoms and we medicate them.
And what type of withdrawal symptoms have you observed?
Nausea, vomiting, body aches, hypoerection, rhinorrhea, restlessness, anxiety.
Is there a time during the detox process when those symptoms are particularly the most acute?
Yeah.
What stage in the process is that?
Typically day 3 through 5 or 6.
How would you describe Mr. Depp's physical state throughout the detox process?
I don't recall specifics. I'd have to refer to my notes.
How would you describe Mr. Depp's psychological state throughout the detox process?
I don't recall. I'd have to review my notes.
All right, let's go back to your notes then, which I believe is Exhibit 23. Okay, great. Could we first go to the entry dated August 8th, 2014? Ms. Lloyd, does this refresh your recollection as to when you arrived on the island to assist Mr. Depp in his detox process?
According to my notes, it was August 8th.
Okay, and so as I think we established earlier, you met Mr. Depp in June. Fair to say that you had known him for about 2 months at this time?
Correct.
Okay. Can we please go to the entry for August 11th, 2014? Okay. And this is a note you prepared?
Yes.
Okay. If you need to take a minute and read it over, just let me know when you're done, or I can go right into it.
Okay.
Fair to say that this note reflects that Mr. Depp was experiencing discomfort on this date?
According to my notes, yes.
It says he was experiencing muscle spasms, chills, and pains, right?
Correct.
Did you personally observe Mr. Depp in this state?
According to this note, it does not appear I did.
Are these symptoms typical during a detox process?
Yes, they are.
Okay. Can we please go to the entry for August 12th, 2014? Okay. And I believe you looked at this earlier, but I'd just like to direct your attention to the last line in this first paragraph. MD arriving this morning and will assess patient. Do you see that?
Where are we on? What?
So directing your attention to the August 12th, 2014 entry.
Yes, I see it. Sorry.
Oh, great. And so based on your note, it appears that Dr. Kipper arrived on the island on August 12th. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Was the plan always for Dr. Kipper to come down to the island to attend to Mr. Depp?
I don't recall.
Do you recall any issues in your caring for Mr. Depp prior to Dr. Kipper's arrival?
I don't.
Do you recall any medical issues arising with Mr. Depp before Dr. Kipper arrived that caused you concern?
I don't recall.
If there had been a serious medical issue with Mr. Depp prior to Dr. Kipper's arrival, would that have been reflected in your note?
Yes.
If Mr. Depp's behavior had been unmanageable prior to Dr. Kipper's arrival, would that have been reflected in your note?
Yes.
Can we please go to the next entry for August 13th? And Ms. Lloyd, this is also a note that you prepared?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I'd like to direct your attention to the portion of the note that starts with 1340. Again, this is military time, is that right?
Correct.
And I think you testified earlier, this is the time that you prepared the note, not the time of the events reflected in the note, is that right?
Yes. Sometimes, I mean, I don't recall specifics, but sometimes they were at times and sometimes they were done later.
So generally speaking, when you prepare these nursing notes, how long after the events reflected in the note was the note actually prepared by you?
It varied.
Okay, so directing your attention back to the portion that starts with 1340, do you see where it says patient's fiance text to say it wasn't feeling well, MD orders phenos 64.8 milligrams, Neurontin 600 milligrams stat, patient and fiance informed that today and tomorrow will be the most difficult days and to keep in close contact with us. Do you see that?
Yes.
Do you recall informing Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard that the following days would be the most difficult?
Just what was stated in my notes.
Okay. Can we please go to the entry for August 17th, 2014? Do you see that?
I do.
And this is a note you've prepared?
Correct.
Do you recall this specific event?
I do not.
Do you have any reason to doubt that what is reflected in your note is accurate?
No.
Okay. So when you wrote RN and MD found patient sitting quietly on his porch, you believe that's an accurate recitation of how you found Mr. Depp on this date?
Correct.
When you wrote that he was calm and stated he was frustrated, you have no reason to doubt the accuracy of that statement?
Correct.
bring back up Exhibit 23 and specifically go to the August 18th, 2014 entry, which is on Depp 1677. Ms. Lloyd, I'd like to direct your attention to, well, first of all, this is a note that you prepared, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And I'd like to direct your attention to the end of the note, which is actually on the second page, or the next page. You see at the end here where it says, patient was escorted to bed. Do you see that?
Yes.
Would that have been you who escorted Mr. Depp to bed?
I don't recall.
You testified earlier, though, that you did see Mr. Depp in the home that he was staying in on the island, correct?
Correct.
And it says plans to leave the island tomorrow. See that?
I do.
And directing your attention to the next note, August 19th, do you see that it says next to 2335, arrive back in LA?
Yes.
Okay, so does this accurately reflect that you left the island on August 19th, 2014?
According to these notes, yes.
Okay. I'd like to direct your attention to the August 20th, 2014 entry, which starts on the next page. And then if you go to the next page as well, you can see that there's another entry for August 20th, 2014. Do you see that?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Okay. On this page here, I'd like to direct your attention to the portion that starts with 12:30. Do you see that?
Yes.
Now, it says here RN and MD spent time talking with patients. Do you see that?
I do.
This would have been you and Dr. Kipper, correct?
Correct.
And does this reflect that you spoke with Mr. Depp in person?
I don't recall. I would, yes.
Okay. And the note goes on to say, patient expressed frustration with the detox process and with not liking how the phenobarb was making him feel. Initially, he stated he was done with the process and no longer wanted MD and RN services. After processing his feelings and realizing how far he had come, and that part of his wanting to give up was due to tensions between him and his fiance. Patient, fiance, RN, and MD came up with a plan for fiance to take a few days for herself, and patient was willing to continue treatment, but was going to refuse phenobarbital from this point forward. Do you see that?
I do.
Okay, did I read that correctly?
Yes.
Do you recall tensions between Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard at this stage in his detox process?
Yes.
And what do you recall about that?
I recall Johnny feeling that she was trying to interfere.
In what way did he feel she was trying to interfere?
By reporting to us things that he didn't feel were true.
Can you think of a specific instance where Ms. Heard reported something to you that you found out later was not true?
I cannot remember specifics.
Do you recall the plan for Ms. Hurd to take a few days for herself?
I don't recall specifics.
But you do recall there being tension between Mr. Depp and Ms. Hurd around this time?
Yes,
And do you recall that having an impact on Mr. Depp's treatment?
I don't recall specifics.
Let's go on to the entry for August 25th, please. First of all, is this a note that you've prepared?
It is.
Directing your attention to the portion that starts with 1900. First line says, meeting at MD's house was quite stressful for patient. Do you see that?
I do.
Do you recall attending a meeting with Mr. Depp at Dr. Kipper's house?
I don't recall.
The next line says, him and his fiance are having a hard time communicating and understanding each other's point of view and feelings. Do you see that?
I do.
Do you recall any specifics about this situation?
I do not.
A couple sentences down, it says, plan is for fiance to start therapy tomorrow. Do you see that?
Yes.
Do you recall that Ms. Hurd started therapy shortly after Mr. Depp's detox process?
I don't recall.
Do you have any understanding as to why Ms. Hurd was starting therapy?
I do not.
Directing your attention to the entry for August 27th, 2014, which starts on Depp 1687, or 86, excuse me. 1686, yep. Again, this is an entry you prepared.
It is.
Okay. Do you see where it says, received text from patient's sister that patient had been recording music with his friend until 5 and did not go to sleep until 7 and is currently sleeping?
Yes.
And who is Mr. Depp's sister that's referred to here?
Christy.
And at this time, have you met Christy before?
I don't recall.
Have you met Christy before?
Yes.
How many times?
I don't know.
More than once?
More than once, yes.
At this time, have you communicated with Christy about Mr. Depp's treatment before?
I don't recall.
Okay, the entry goes on to say, sister stated that patient and his fiance had a disagreement last night and that patient was able to remain calm and handle the situation appropriately. Do you see that?
Yeah.
Do you recall Christy telling you that?
I do not.
See the portion of the note that starts with 1330.
I do.
The second line reads, patient expressing feeling about argument with fiance and feels relationship is putting unwanted stress on him right now. Do you see that?
I do.
Do you recall this exchange with Mr. Depp? Sorry, I didn't catch that. Lloyd.
I'm sorry, I do not.
Okay. Based on this note, can you tell whether this was a conversation you had in person with Mr. Depp?
Based on this note, yes.
Do you recall on other occasions Mr. Depp expressing to you that his relationship was putting unwanted stress on him?
I'd have to review my notes.
Okay, directing your attention down to the portion of the note that says, that starts with 2130. It says, patient back home. For patient, he had a long conversation with fiance, and they both understand that right now is a time to work on themselves as individuals. Patient's fiance now has an RN to help her anxiety and to monitor her while she is starting a new mood stabilizer medication. Do you see that?
I do.
Who was, I believe you testified to this earlier, Miss Heard's nurse was Erin Borum, is that right? And Miss Borum was an employee of yours, is that correct?
She was an independent contractor.
Okay. But you placed her, Dr. Kipper, is that right?
Correct.
Okay. Do you recall when Miss Borum was assigned Miss Heard?
I do not recall.
Do you have any understanding as to why Miss Heard needed a nurse?
Other than what my notes state, I do not.
Do you recall witnessing Miss Heard being anxious or having anxiety?
I do not recall.
Now, the last line here says, patient feels this will take some of the stress off their relationship, and in return, if we could go to the next page, take some stress off of him. Did I read that correctly?
I do.
Do you recall why Mr. Depp felt that Ms. Heard having a nurse would reduce the stress on their relationship?
I do not recall.
From your perspective, was it important to Mr. Depp's treatment that his stress be reduced?
Yes.
And why is that?
Any patient going through detox or changes, it's always important to relieve as much stress as you can from them.
Let's go to the entry for September 10th, please, which is on Depp 1694 and continues on to 1695. September 10th, 2014 entry. This is your entry, correct? You prepared this?
Correct.
Okay.
Sorry.
Sorry. And if I could direct your attention to the portion that starts with 2330, which is actually on the next page. The first line says, met with patient, he complained of body aches and nausea. Do you see that?
I do.
And does this reflect that you were physically with Mr. Depp at this time?
It would, yes.
Okay. A couple sentences down, it says, and this portion is highlighted here, while RN was visiting patient, fiance came in and tried to start argument with him. Patient was able to stay calm and talk his fiance down. Do you see that?
I do.
Do you recall the incident reflected in this note?
I do not.
Do you recall any instances where you witnessed Ms. Heard try to start a fight with Mr. Depp?
No.
How many instances do you remember?
I don't recall specific numbers.
Do you remember at least one?
Yes.
Do you remember more than one?
Yes.
More than two?
I don't recall specific numbers.
What do you remember about that first instance that you can remember?
I remember one night trying to leave the penthouse and Amber standing in the elevator and not letting us leave.
Why wasn't she letting you leave?
She didn't want him to leave.
Had they been fighting previous to that point?
I wasn't there previously.
And what's the other instance you remember?
I can't remember specifics.
Do you have any reason to doubt the accuracy of what's reflected in your note here?
No.
Do you have any understanding as to what you meant when you said patient was able to remain calm, was able to stay calm, excuse me, and talk his fiance down?
I don't recall the events of that note.
Had you seen Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard get in a fight before this date?
I don't recall.
Let's go to the entry for September 12th, please. And this is a note that you prepared as well, Ms. Lloyd?
Is correct.
Okay. The first line here says RN and MD visited patient at work. Do you see that?
I do.
And so this reflects that both you and Dr. Kipper went and saw Mr. Depp. Is that right?
Correct.
And the entry states here, patient expressed some concerns with fiance's behavior and how it is adding stress to his life. Do you see that?
I do.
Do you recall this, Mr. Depp saying this to you in this instance?
I do not.
Do you have any reason to doubt the accuracy of what's reflected in your note?
I do not.
Could we please go to the entry for October 22nd, 2014, which starts on 1717 and continues on to Depp 1718.
My notes are different. What's the top of the, I see the top of that, just so I know what I'm looking. Okay. 10. Okay.
First of all, this is also a note that you prepared, correct?
Correct.
And if you want to take a minute and read through the note, I know it goes on for 2 pages.
Okay. Oh.
Just let me know when you've read through it.
Okay.
fair to say that this note reflects that you and Mr. were in Georgia at this, when this, the events in this note occurred?
I think we were, at the end, it says now in Georgia. I don't recall, but the travel day.
Well, do you see above that where it says 10/22? And then below it, it says now in Georgia?
Yeah.
Okay. So based on your notes, you were in Georgia on October 22nd, 2015? Okay. Do you recall being in Georgia with Mr. Depp?
Yes.
Do you recall who else was with you in Georgia?
I don't recall who was with us, but the purpose of the trip was to visit Amber on location.
Okay, so Amber was in Georgia as well.
Yes.
Okay. Now, directing your attention to the portion of the entry which is on the next page and begins with 1530. It states here, he requested an emergency session with the psychiatrist to discuss feeling about arguments with fiance and would like some tools to help him feel with his emotions. Do you see that?
I do.
Do you recall Mr. Depp and Ms. Hurd having a fight on this trip in Georgia?
I do not.
Do you recall who Mr. Depp's psychiatrist was at this time?
I do not.
Do you recall why Mr. Depp started seeing a psychiatrist?
I do not.
Directing your attention down to the portion of the note that starts with 2010, it says here, patient spoke to a psychiatrist for 50 minutes and was open and honest with his feelings. He feels better after conversation, but also feels he is in a no-win situation with fiance. Do you see that?
I'm kind of lost where we're at right now.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, 15:30. Okay, yes, yeah, I see it. Sorry.
Okay. Does this reflect that you were present with Mr. Depp when he spoke to his psychiatrist?
I don't remember. It was based on him telling me or if I was present.
Do you recall Mr. Depp ever expressing to you that he felt he was in a no-win situation with Ms. Hurd?
I don't recall those specific words.
But you wrote them in your nursing notes, correct? Do you see at the bottom, still in this portion that starts with 2010, do you see where it says, plan is for patient and fiance to go to dinner this evening. Patient is feeling exhausted and wants to stay home, but does not want to upset fiance. Do you see that?
We're on the same page.
Yes, we're still in the portion of the note that starts with 2010.
2010. Okay. Yes. Yep.
Do you recall this specific incident?
I do not.
Do you have any understanding as to why Mr. Depp would be concerned about upsetting his fiance?
I do not.
If we could go on to the next entry, which is on the same page, 1023. And this is also a note you prepared, Ms. Lloyd?
It is.
Okay. It says here you text patient to see if RN could come by and check in. Do you see that?
I do.
Why did you want to check in on Mr. Depp?
I don't recall.
Were you ever concerned about Mr. Depp when he and Miss Heard were in arguments?
Yes.
Why were you concerned?
Their arguments were a trigger for him emotionally.
Any other reasons?
No.
What do you mean by a trigger for him emotionally?
They would cause him to be upset, add stress.
The next portion of this note says, when RN arrived in the room, patient was agitated and felt fiance was using the term mania to explain his behavior and excuse herself from any fault during arguments. Do you see that?
You?
Do you have any, did you ever hear Miss Heard use the term mania to describe Mr. Depp?
I don't recall if that was, I heard it from her or heard it that she was saying it to others.
But you do have some recollection of hearing that Miss Heard was using that word, whether it was directly from her or from others.
Yes.
The note goes on to say, patient was upset by this label. RN processed his feelings with patient, and he was able to see fiance's negative behaviors. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
Do you have any recollection of what you meant when you wrote that?
I do not.
You don't have any understanding of what fiance's negative behaviors refers to?
I don't recall specifics.
Do you recall generally?
Yes.
And what do you recall?
At times, what's the word? She would almost try to instigate him.
And when you say she, you're referring to Miss Heard?
Yes.
Did you ever witness that personally?
Yes.
On more than one occasion?
Yes.
Ballpark, how many times did you witness that during the time you cared for Mr. Depp?
I don't recall a number.
More than 5?
I don't recall.
When you say Ms. Heard would try to instigate him, what do you mean?
I remember an argument or being in there when he was going from room to room trying to remove himself from a situation, and she would just follow him from room to room and not give him his space.
And that's one specific instance that you remember?
Yes.
Do you remember seeing that type of behavior on other occasions?
Yes.
Are you aware of any of the fights that we just went through? Are you aware that any of them became physical?
No.
From what you observed, what was the cause of the friction between Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard during this time?
I don't know.
Could we please go to the entry for November 3rd, 2014, which is on Depp 172?
172, sorry, counsel.
Yes, 1721. Ms. Lloyd, this is also a note you prepared?
Correct.
And it says here, you arrived at Mr. Depp's home and he was, quote, focused on relationship with fiance and is struggling with conflicted emotions. Did I read that right?
Yes.
Based on this note, is that something Mr. Depp would have told you?
Based on this note, it appears so.
Looks like there's another note for November 3rd below this one. Do you see that? And it continues on to the next page, which is Depp 1722. If we could go there, please.
Very good. Very good. Thank
You sound
And Ms. Lloyd, directing your attention to the portion that starts with 1700. Do you see where it says RN went back to patient's house? He was chatting with a friend and is feeling stressed about his relationship. Do you see that?
I do.
And it goes on to say he feels she is not being truthful with him and he is not sure how to comfort her about this confront her about this when she arrives home. Do you see that?
Yes.
And the she here refers to Ms. Heard, is that right?
Correct.
Do you remember this exchange with Mr. Depp?
Objection, hearsay.
Do you have any reason to doubt the accuracy of your note?
I do not.
If we could turn to the entry for November 17th, 2014, which begins on Depp 1723, which is the different. Ms. Lloyd, you see at the very bottom, it says 1117?
Yes.
Okay. And then I think the entry itself is on the next page. Yes. Thank you. This is also a note you prepared?
Correct.
And this says RN and MD went to patient's house to assess him. Do you see that?
I do.
And so again, this reflects that you and Dr. Kipper went to see Mr. Depp.
Correct.
Do you have any recollection of why why Dr. Kipper was visiting with Mr. Depp at this time?
I do not.
The next line says, patient appeared anxious and depressed over relationship issues. Do you see that?
I do.
And then it says, patient continues to be ambivalent about relationship status. Do you see that?
I do.
Do you recall Mr. Depp expressing these sentiments to you?
Objection, hearsay.
I don't recall specific conversations.
But you also have, but this is what you wrote in your notes, correct? I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. Oh,
Correct. Sorry.
okay, sorry. Do you recall when Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard got married?
I don't recall the dates.
Okay. But you testified earlier that you did attend the wedding.
Correct.
Were you there to provide nursing services?
I don't really recall if I was a guest or I don't think they made that clear to me.
Did Dr. Kipper attend the wedding?
He did.
And did Aaron Borum attend the wedding?
He did.
Do you recall any discussions of a prenuptial agreement between Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard before they got married?
Yes.
And what do you recall?
I don't recall specifics.
What do you recall generally?
I only recall what Johnny told me about the conversation,
And what was that?
that she didn't take it well.
Didn't take what well?
The idea,
Sorry, I didn't hear the end of that.
the idea of having to sign a prenup.
Did Johnny tell you that he asked Ms. Heard to sign a prenup?
I don't recall specifics.
But you recall Johnny telling you that Ms. Heard didn't want to sign a prenup.
Yes.
And when you say didn't take that well, what are you referring to?
From what Johnny said, her reaction was when they spoke about the prenup.
Do you recall that in January of 2015, Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard traveled to Japan together?
I don't recall.
Do you recall traveling to Japan with Mr. Depp?
I recall being in Japan, yes.
Do you remember anything specific about that trip?
I do not.
Do you recall Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard having a fight on a plane?
I recall a fight on a plane, but I don't know the time it was around.
What do you remember about that fight?
It was another instance where he was sitting at a table and not wanting to talk, and she wouldn't leave the table.
What was she doing?
She wouldn't leave the table. And he was saying, please just go away.
And what was she saying?
I don't remember. I don't remember her words.
How was her tone?
I don't recall.
Okay. You spoke with Mr. Nadelhoff about this earlier, but at some point you traveled to Australia with Mr. Depp, right?
Correct.
Can we pull up what has been previously marked as Exhibit 14? I'd like to direct your attention to the March 1st, 2015 email from Dr. Kipper at 2:10 p.m. Do you see that?
I do.
Do you recall Mr. Depp having issues with his sleep when he was in Australia?
Not specifically in Australia.
Do you recall Mr. Depp having issues with his sleep generally?
Yes.
And what issues were those?
A hard time sleeping and staying on a sleep schedule.
Miss Lloyd, when you were in Australia with Mr. Depp, did you see where he was staying?
Yes.
And how many times did you go to that property?
I don't recall specific numbers.
Fair to say you went there multiple times, though?
Yes.
You talked about this with Mr. Nadelhoff earlier. At some point in Australia, you learned that Mr. Depp had injured his finger, correct?
Correct.
And Dr. Kipper was already in Australia at that time?
Correct.
And you testified earlier that you and Dr. Kipper went to see Mr. Depp after he injured his finger, correct?
Correct.
Do you recall anything about what do you recall about Mr. Depp's physical appearance when you first saw him?
Don't recall specifics.
What do you remember about his demeanor, if anything?
I don't remember the events of when I first arrived.
But you did see Mr. Depp at that time, correct?
I can't recall when I initially saw him after the finger event.
And I believe you testified you don't recall whether Miss Heard was at the house when you went to attend to Mr. Depp, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Do you remember seeing Miss Heard in Australia?
Yes.
Did you ever see any injuries on Miss Heard when she was in Australia?
Yes.
What did you see?
A bruise on her arm.
Anything else?
No.
Did she have any injuries to her face that you can recall?
Not that I recall.
Any cuts or abrasions that you can recall?
Not that I recall.
Do you recall Miss Heard ever seeking medical treatment from you while she was in Australia?
I do not recall her ever seeking a medical treatment from me.
At the time that Mr. Depp injured his finger, Miss Heard was a patient of Dr. Kipper, correct?
I'm not sure.
Do you recall whether Miss Borum was already assigned to Miss Heard?
I don't recall if she was working with her at that time.
Can we turn back to the nursing notes, which is Exhibit 23? And specifically, the entry for March 7th, which is on 1732.
This March 7th of 2014, or
Yes, it says 3/7/15. Do you see that?
oh, so 15. Hold on, no. I wasn't there on 14. Yes,
You said you saw a bruise on Miss Heard's arm at some point when you were in Australia, correct?
correct.
Do you have any understanding of how she got that bruise?
I do not.
Okay, directing your attention to the entry for March 7th, 2015. You see here it says MD received text message from client that he had been arguing with his wife and that he had cut his finger.
Yes, I see that.
Okay, so this is the date that you went and saw Mr. Depp after his injury, correct?
Correct.
Now, if I could direct your attention down to the portion that starts with 1530.
Okay.
It says MD cleaned and dressed wound to our middle finger. Do you see that?
Thank you.
What does our middle finger reflect?
Right.
And so Mr. Depp had cut his middle right finger, is that correct?
According to this, yes.
Now, if I could direct your attention down to the bottom part of this entry that starts with 1130. Do you see that?
I do.
Now, this starts with patient and staff returned from ER at 2130. Do you see that?
Yeah.
So, is it correct that the 1130 at the beginning of this is referring to 11:30 p.m.?
Yeah, that would make sense.
So this is the same day that you were notified that Mr. Depp had injured his finger, correct?
According to this, yes.
Okay. And this was also the same day that Mr. Depp was seen in the AER for his finger, correct? Okay. In the middle of the page here, do you see, or in the middle of this entry, do you see where it says, upon arrival back to apartment, patient discussed feelings of anger and sadness about his relationship. Patient was encouraged to stay away from wife as the relationship is toxic. Patient expressed verbal understanding and why they needed to separate. Do you see that?
Yes.
Do you have any recollection of this conversation beyond what's reflected in the notes?
I do not.
Do you have any reason to doubt the accuracy of what you documented in your notes?
I do not.
Do you recall advising Mr. Depp to stay away from Miss Heard?
I don't recall anything other than what's stated in my notes.
Do you recall ever having the view that Mr. Depp and Miss Heard's relationship was toxic?
Yes.
And what's the basis for that view?
Conversations that he would share with me.
What did Mr. Depp share with you?
I don't remember specifics, just like things we've reviewed in my notes, that he would be emotional and that the relationship was causing him stress.
After Mr. Depp injured his finger in Australia, do you recall him coming back to LA?
Yeah, I don't recall specifics, but I know we did return to LA at some point.
Was Mr. Depp's hand bandaged at all?
Yes.
And why was that?
Beforehand we kept it bandaged to keep it clean, and then he had surgery and it was bandaged after the surgery.
Do you recall that Mr. Depp had pins in his finger?
Yes.
Do you recall Mr. Depp reporting that his finger was in pain?
Yes.
How would he report his pain to you?
I have to review my notes for specifics.
Well, let's take a look at the entry in your notes for March 23rd, 2015, which is on it starts on page 1735 and goes on to 736.
I see that.
Actually, before we turn to that one, do you see in the entry above for 32215? Do you see that entry?
Yep.
Okay, and do you see next to 20, the portion of the entry that starts with 2015? You see in the middle it says currently 5/10?
Yes.
Do you know what that refers to?
It's a pain scale.
Okay. And is that how Mr. Depp would report his pain to you?
According to my notes.
Okay. Okay, so now going to the entry for March 23rd. First of all, do you see the portion of the entry that starts with 1:20?
Yes.
Is this 1:20 in the morning, a.m.?
According to this, yes.
Okay. Do you see it's says, patient states his wife is trying to argue with him.
I see that.
And again, you have no reason to doubt the accuracy of your note.
Correct.
Okay. Turning to the next page, do you see the portion of the note that starts with 545?
Yes.
And it says call to loft, correct? What does that refer to?
I don't know specifically. Loft is where they were living.
Is that the Eastern Columbia building?
Correct.
And then the next two sections of this note says 820 Torrid Val, and then at 1445, the same thing. Do you see that? What is that referring to?
Incomplete notes. It would have been Toradol and Valium administered.
And do you have any recollection as to why those medications would have been administered?
They were for his pain.
Okay. And then you see below that it says FU Thursday afternoon and Tuesday afternoon, skin graft bandage off, week from Tuesday, pin off in 2 weeks.
Yes.
What does this reflect?
I don't recall.
Did Mr. Depp have a skin graft on his finger?
He did.
And I think you just testified, he had pins in his fingers as well, right? Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Correct.
Okay. So at this time on March 23rd, he had bandages and a skin graft and pins in his finger.
According to this, yes.
And then, do you see in the section that starts with 2000, patient informed wife is coming to talk to him and he became extremely anxious. Do you see that?
I do.
Do you have any recollection of why Mr. Depp was anxious?
I do not.
Do you remember being present for a fight with Mr. Depp, between Mr. Depp and Miss Heard, shortly after Mr. Depp returned from Australia?
I don't remember specifics.
Do you recall a fight when Amber's sister Whitney was present?
I don't recall.
Can we please pull up document H, please?
Exhibit 27.
Now, just for the record, this is a document that has the base number WH106 through 109. And Ms. Lloyd, you're not included on this, but I just want to direct your attention to the first text message here. This is I can represent to you, these are text messages between Erin Borum and Whitney Hurd.
Okay.
And before I proceed, do you know who Whitney Hurd is?
Yes.
Have you met her before? On how many occasions have you met Whitney?
I don't recall.
And what is Whitney's relation to Miss Hurd?
Sister.
So this first text message appears to be from Erin Borum, and it says, Debbie just, and it's on 14:32 in military time on the date March 23rd, 2015. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay, and it says, Debbie just told me what is going on and should check with you. Is Amber awake or fall asleep? Do you see that?
Yeah.
Do you recall reaching out to Erin Borum on this date?
I do not.
Directing your attention down to Whitney's, to 3 messages down from Whitney. Or excuse me, let's go up. Do you see that Whitney responds to Erin, she finally fell asleep. And then Erin says, thank goodness, she must be exhausted. Do you want me to come to the loft, or is she safe and sound asleep? Do you see that?
Yeah.
Okay, and then Whitney responds, safe? No, she's not. She keeps saying she wants to kill herself. Do you see that?
I do.
Did you ever hear Miss Hurd say that she wanted to kill herself?
No.
Do these text messages combined with your notes refresh your recollection about an incident that occurred on March 23rd, 2015?
I remember an incident, but I don't remember the dates of it.
What incident are you remembering?
There was an incident where Johnny and Amber got into a fight at the lofts.
And what do you remember about that?
I was staying next door at a hotel, and security had come to get me, saying that they had had an argument and Johnny wanted to go back to 86. So
Is that, is 86 the Sweetser property?
yes.
Okay, sorry, continue.
And so I went to the lofts, and I remember that night Amber was already leaving. She was in the lobby when we walked through, and when she saw that I was coming, she came back up to the apartment.
And what happened when Miss Hurd came back up to the apartment?
I don't remember specifically what happened. I remember Johnny was sitting outside, and we went to leave, and somehow we didn't end up leaving.
And why didn't you end up leaving?
I don't remember.
Do you remember who else was in the apartment?
I remember Travis, one of the security guards, was there.
Anyone else that you can remember?
I don't remember exactly who else was there.
Is Travis McGivern?
Correct.
Do you recall seeing Ms. Hurd throw anything at Mr. Depp?
I do not.
Do you remember Mr. Depp throwing anything at Ms. Hurd?
I don't recall.
Do you remember witnessing any physical violence on that occasion?
I saw Johnny push over one of Amber's clothing racks.
Okay. No physical violence directed at
No
a
physical
human, correct? Okay. Okay. And then you said you didn't end up leaving the apartment after that, correct?
At some point that night we left.
And when you say we, who does that include?
Myself, Johnny, and Travis.
And where did you go?
I don't remember.
Okay. Do you know where Amber went that night?
I don't know.
Okay. But she didn't come with you?
No.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and take our afternoon recess for 15 minutes, okay? Again, don't talk to anybody and don't do any outside research, okay? All right, we'll see you in 15 minutes. All right, we'll come back at 3:45 then? Okay, all right, thank you.